Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thinking About Your Thinking, Metacognitive Strategies for Academic Success. I'm Dr. Dorsey-Elson, Dr. Laura Dorsey-Elson, and I direct Morgan's Center for Teaching Excellence. We call it here at Morgan the Center for Innovative Instruction and Scholarship, but I'm also a 25 plus year professor, and I've worked with tons of undergraduate students in my career, just like you. And I'm very excited to give you a mini talk on learning strategies that can help with your success. So let's start with something familiar. All right. Think about your academic journey, even before you got to Morgan State. You study hard for a test, you feel pretty confident going in, and then you get your feedback, your assessment, your grade, and you think, what happened? This is a totally common experience for learners, particularly as they enter the world of higher education and certainly before. So that moment of what happened, I prepared, I thought I aced this. I want you to know first off, out the gate, when thinking about how you learned that moment of disbelief is not about your intelligence. It's really about awareness. It's about awareness around how you learn. And that's a skill you can build. So, awareness about how you learn is something that we call in the world of education and in my area, faculty development to help make great educators. We call that area metacognition. And there's a whole history behind this field, but really, metacognition is about thinking about your thinking. And it actually correlates with working with your brain and how it can plan, monitor, and evaluate your learning. So, metacognition is what I'm going to talk about, what you're going to talk about also in your classes this week. And let's get into it. So, the term metacognition won't go into the long history, but it's been around since around the 1970s. It was coined and the theory around it started, and also the practice, how to teach students how to learn in the 1970s. We have to credit John Flavel for this. And in that early research, long before many of you were on this planet, I was on the planet, but we will get into all of my own age. But long before you were here, there were people trying to help students just like you discover and build that awareness about what learning strategies build success in academics. So there's two parts to metacognition. There's metacognitive knowledge, that's knowing what helps you learn best, and metacognitive regulation. That's that planning and monitoring component that I just showed you and adjusting as you learn. Dr. Sandra McGuire, who is one of my personal heroes now, and Dr. McGuire works with Morgan faculty. Dr. McGuire is very well known in her work in helping learners learn how to learn, just like you. I highly recommend you take a look at this book, Teach Students How to Learn. Your faculty are going to be taking a look at this book more across the campus, but you can too. There's a companion novel around teaching how students can teach themselves. But Dr. McGuire, most importantly, has a really great quote. She says in her book and in her career, across all the time she's worked with students just like you, she always reminds us that academic success, it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. Okay. And once you understand the learning process metacognitively for yourself, it's about using that knowledge and awareness to work smarter, to work with your brain so that you, when you walk into those exams and you complete those projects and you write those papers, you know that you have been working with your brain. In addition to Dr. McGuire, there's another really cool group of people called the learning scientists, and they have a whole host of strategies that are metacognitive strategies, and I'm going to share with you in just a moment. So again, Planning, monitoring, and evaluating. That's that metacognitive regulation that I was talking about. That's really something you could do. It's something we can all do. When we plan for our learning, we ask ourselves, what do I already know? What am I trying to learn? And how will I know I've learned it? And thinking about the strategies and the tools that are out there that are going to help you answer those questions in ways that give you success on those tests in a more certain way, right? There's a lot of research that shows that there are strategies you can plan to use that work. Then on when you monitor, so planning is one part of metacognition, then monitoring your choices on what you do to study, think about how you study is a metacognitive act. Because while you study, you can pause and go, can I explain what I just read in my own words? Could I teach it to someone who's never even been in the course, who isn't even with me here at Morgan State or wherever you are? That's a metacognitive monitoring question, because if the answer to those two questions is I can't say it in my own words, and I don't think I could tell somebody who hasn't even been reading when I just spent 20 minutes reading, then you know your actions are not quite solidifying your learning. And that's a great way to evaluate and reflect, which is that third part. And think about, are the strategies I'm using, are they working? And what can I change? What can I do differently? Right? So that you're more intentional. Once you're aware of something, you can be intentional about changing it, not just feeling the frustration of, well, I studied, why didn't I pass? The questions really are, how did I study? And how was I certain when I studied that I had learned something? And those are questions to ask long before you're taking a pressure-filled exam, right? You want to know those answers before. And this is what metacognition helps you develop. But I mentioned those learning scientists to you before, right? Well, they're back. And they are a really cool group. I highly recommend you to search the learning scientists. Just do a search. They have tons of metacognitive strategies and materials and really helpful videos. But I'm going to try to sum up what they suggest based on learning science and metacognitive science that, again, started long, long ago. So we know these methods work. And they suggest that if you do something called retrieval practice and space practice, something called interleaving, elaboration, and concrete examples or dual coding, all of these strategies are successful strategies for learning. And I highly encourage you to look more into these strategies. Take a look at some of the graphics that I'm showing you here. So that elaboration strategy, that was that question. Can I explain something to a friend? Could I tell somebody else about what I'm learning? To how are you spacing your studying? You know, that 6 hour night before cram session is not something that results in learning. We know this. So there really, if you study shorter amounts of time, but you space that studying over time in preparation for a major assessment, and even a smaller assessment, but if you do smaller chunks of time, which should feel like good news to you, oh man, I don't have to put in hours and hours. Not really. Learning theory and metacognitive theory tells us that smaller clips regularly paced over time work better than that long haul or that cram session that we talked about earlier in my video. So we're coming to a close of my mini talk. I'm almost certain you're thinking about yourself, which is the whole point, doing some of that inventory of how do I study and starting to have those really important metacognitive questions for yourself. Congratulations. And if you've been doing this kind of thinking all along, way to go. No matter if you're just starting to think this way about your learning or it's been something that you've built up your own practice around, I hope that some of the strategies are helpful and you have an idea of where to go look for more resources, both within this video and the supporting material in our orientation course. I just want to leave you with this. Look at the two images on the screen, right? If you're somebody who highlights, think about a student that just highlights and thinks that that's learning. And then the student on the right of the screen, the student that is evaluating, probably taking a practice test, referencing some notes they've took and probably reviewed prior to doing another practice test. Which student do you think is going to be more successful on whatever assessment is coming out? Well, the answer is it's the student on the right. That student who's not just highlighting, because all those colors, that's super helpful to categorize maybe certain types of content, but how would a student know if they're learning if they don't practice before they go into the major test? Okay. And that's because the student on the right, which is you, can be you, and will be you here at Morgan State University, knows about metacognitive strategies and they're putting them into practice. So I really bring this short video to a close and say to you, don't forget, Dr. McGuire, one of my heroes in metacognitive work with college students, writes, when you know how to learn, you can learn anything. When you know how to learn, you can do anything. So don't forget, get your metacognitive strategies in line for your success. Plan, monitor, and evaluate all the time with each step of the way, and you will succeed. Thanks, everyone.